All right, Texas 27, A&M 17. Didn't see the final score coming, but the spread in this game was under three, so it wasn't going to be a shock if Texas won the game. I think one of the things, as I'm looking at the stat sheet right now, that does surprise me is Texas outrushed Texas A&M. That I didn't see coming. I thought probably if Texas got the job done, it was going to be Arch Manning. It was going to be a lot more passing yards. Arch had a good game. Not a great game, but a very good game. I think his game sort of mirrored the Texas team that you could feel momentum building with sort of late in the year. Before we talk about this game, I know no one talked about them beating Arkansas last week. I thought that was a big deal too. You think about it, coming out of the Georgia game, A&M game on deck, they could have laid down, they didn't. So that was one signal that, I mean, Sark hasn't lost anything there. That team hasn't lost any momentum or any motivation. So we waited on that stuff. We waited on it all year for Texas. May have waited a little bit too late. I'll get into the playoff stuff in just a second, but outrushing Texas A&M. I want to remind everyone one of the edges that you would have thought A&M had coming into this game was maybe the physical edge, maybe the ability, if anyone controlled the game on the ground, to control the game on the ground. But think about what we just watched, and then think about last year. I was at this game last year. This is 2 years in a row where Texas has kind of owned A&M offensively, defensively rather, and it really sort of put them in a vice grip. And these games are so huge. Rivalry games are so huge. There's a lot of stuff that people say, now that the playoff era has made it different. Like A&M can lose this game and still go to the playoff. Ohio State could lose to Michigan last year and still go to the playoff and win it all. I could not care less. Rivalry games are their own season. Rivalry games are a huge deal. No one walks around College Station or Austin or Dallas or San Antonio and talks about who they could potentially play 6 months down the road in a national title game. They talk about that game that they know is going to be on the schedule at the end of the year, and it wasn't on the schedule for a long time. And Texas won the thing again, and it was impressive. So we talk about winners first on this show, on this channel, I guess, because we're not doing a show because this is a hotel room in Columbus, Georgia. I thought from very, very early on in the season, deficiencies were obvious with this Texas team. A lot of the criticism I heard about Steve Sarkisian throughout the year is he's trying to call an offensive game plan for a team he doesn't have. I think there's validity to that. I also think that it's a lot easier to, call that action from the couch behind me here than to just switch on the fly. But then the flip side to that is someone says, well, that's why you get paid what you get paid. You ought to be able to do that. And that's its whole debate. That could be like a huge debate on a stage somewhere that people pay a lot of money to listen to. Bottom line, though, is here's the other part of college football that good teams do. They're supposed to get better. You don't develop in the spring and summer, and then once fall gets here, you just stop. That's like lifting weights. You don't stop that. You alter it. Obviously, spring and summer are structured a lot different than the fall. But I do think one of the things you can say about Texas is they never stop searching. They never stop squeezing the sponge to try and get enough out. And they're a very flawed resume, but they had a resume at least that when they got to the end here, they had a shot to put up against others. Now, I literally am recording this as this game just ended, and I was listening to Steve Sarkisian. I was listening to him talk in pretty passionate terms about why he thinks they should make the playoff. Couple of things on that. I don't believe that the committee will find room for them. However, it's not one of those slam dunk things. Like it's not one of those you're crazy if you suggest they should be in. I don't believe that. Of course, you've got to see the rest of the field play out first. Like, what if there's just total chaos? Or what if chalk holds totally? I don't know any of that. But just independent of all that, let's assume a quasi-normal Saturday and then quasi-normal conference championship weekend plays out. The thing with Texas that is going to get thrown back in their face is the Florida game. And that's one of the prices you pay to be in the Southeastern Conference. Honestly, you get a lot of benefits playing in the Southeastern Conference. One of the things Texas has found this out about, one of the things about playing in the SEC is the bad teams are extremely talented. And that is not the case anywhere else. It's not the case to the degree it is in the SEC. So Florida is a terrible team this year, but they got NFL guys all over the place. The closest example, the closest parallel that the Big Ten gave us on that front this year is Penn State. Penn State, terrible record, season's gone down the drain. Indiana goes up there and they're in a dogfight with them. And it makes no sense if you just go by what records say. But some of the teams that are bad any given year are bad for reasons that don't have anything to do with talent. Now, that doesn't change what their record is. That doesn't change that they shouldn't be involved in any playoff conversation. What it does mean is on any given Saturday, if they just happen to be up, they could pop you. It doesn't matter that they're sub 500. Texas got that from Florida. Now, I'm not making excuses for them. You still got to go win the game. And I'm actively, in fact, saying that Texas probably doesn't belong in the playoff. You get tons of benefits by being in the SEC. If you're in the SEC, that means you're in the South. So that probably means you have access to a ton of talent. You have access to a very passionate fan base that you can tap into. It's second to none. Plus, you're Texas. So you're just loaded beyond measure in terms of wealth and resources and whatnot. The exchange on that is you're going to have to deal with that kind of schedule. So no one's going to make excuses for you. No one's going to cry for you. And also, I think even in some of their wins this year, Kentucky and Mississippi State on the road, they kind of struggled. They had to come from behind to beat Mississippi State. I'm not hating on Texas. I'm just saying that's going to be the counter argument that I think more than offsets the late momentum that they will get from beating Texas A&M, but it doesn't take away from the win. Okay, this is what I always try and preach about college football. This should be celebrated in a vacuum over here, totally independent of ramifications about conference championships or playoff seeding. Dude, you just beat Texas A&M. You wrecked their hopes at going to Atlanta, and I'll shift to Texas A&M for a second. They still will not know what a conference championship game appearance feels like. Therefore, they will not know what a conference championship win feels like. They're still going to go to the playoff. That's fine. They may win it all, for all I know. Who knows? They may. But that doesn't mean this doesn't sting. And I want to just say the same thing I said to Ohio State folks last year. Like Ohio State beat Michigan, or lost to Michigan rather, just like A&M just lost to Texas. And there was this defense mechanism that kicked in amongst Ohio State folks trying to pretend like they didn't care as much about the outcome of the game just because they were going to the playoffs. It was BS then. It was even BS after they went on to win it all. Of course, it's nice to go on and win a national championship. That doesn't reduce the sting of losing to Michigan. Ohio A&M is going to go to the playoff. That doesn't reduce the sting here. It's what makes the rivalry beautiful. You don't have to pretend this didn't matter. Okay, I know it hurts, and if you just want to sit in your house for 4 or 5 days, which I would recommend, just don't go out in public. That's fine, but don't go out. Just advanced warning. Don't go out and pretend like this didn't really matter. It mattered. You and I both know it mattered. Now, it's 2 years in a row that Texas bottled you up. That's not good. That's Marcel Reed. That's Colin Klein. That's that offensive staff. Got to figure it out. But you're not dead. So I say all that about how gut-wrenching losing this game is, and I mean every word of it, but you're not dead. So in the past, it would have been, man, this season feels like it was all for naught. Well, now you get a reprieve. You more than earned your way into the playoff, but I was over on the TexAgs forum a second ago, just kind of seeing what folks were saying, and there was a post that said, "Hey, if anyone would have told you that we were going to be 11-1 in August, wouldn't you have taken it?" Well, of course, you take it now. Like, of course, that's what you would have taken. However, this is what the recalibration of expectation is about. Every single year, there's a team that has mild to good expectations, or maybe even very good expectations, but they start the season red hot. And by about the halfway point of the season, you don't care what the preseason expectations were anymore. You recalibrate. And so from that point moving forward, you better meet the recalibrated expectations. And if you don't, no one cares that you met and exceeded their preseason expectations. They've long since forgotten those. It was all about the recalibrated expectation. So did A&M exceed preseason expectation? Of course they did. Did they meet and exceed the recalibrated expectation? Well, the recalibrated expectation they failed to meet because that at the very least needed to see them go to Atlanta, and that meant beating Texas, and neither of those things are going to happen. So you have no shortage of inspiration to draw on. All you need to do is look at Ohio State last year and what they failed to do against Michigan and then did in the playoffs. I have felt watching this team down the stretch, even with the South Carolina game that they won, that there's been sort of a November gas tank near empty vibe, if that makes any sense, which is not shocking because they haven't been here. It would be shocking to me if Georgia looked like they were faltering down the stretch or Ohio State because they've been in the position and they know how long these seasons are. One of the things that I always talk about when new contenders enter November is how long November feels. November feels like it's 9 weeks long, especially if you're new at the contenders table, and A&M was. All right, so they didn't have enough gas in the tank to get to the finish line here. The way college football is structured now is you get to pull into the service station and fill back up if you can afford it. And this is kind of the new college football at play. We saw last year again, I keep on going back to the Ohio State parallel. I think it's the closest parallel and the one that A&M needs to pay attention to. They lost what is supposed to be the biggest game of the year. Then they won the biggest prize the sport has to offer. And that doesn't mean that you totally denigrate the value of the rivalry. I don't think anyone who watched this game, either tonight if you're watching this immediately or last night if you're watching it Saturday morning, would say, oh, that place felt kind of dead. No, it didn't. That was one of my big fears when we expanded the playoff. And so far, thankfully, we haven't torched the value of rivalry games. What we have done is we've created this new world that you get to exist in, even if you lose your biggest game. And if that changes the dynamic of the sport down the road, then I'll be the first to speak up on it. So far, so good. So I don't know that it's going to be enough for Texas. But it sure is a really, really good springboard into 2026 at the very, very worst. And let's just see, because I'm not 100% sure they're out. I'm just 90% sure they're out. With Texas A&M, what are we talking about now? We're talking about a home playoff game at Kyle Field, I would assume, which is a weird thing because for as close as this point spread was, I didn't see hardly any projected brackets that had the concept of an A&M 5 to 8 seed home playoff game first round baked into it. But yet here we are. So congrats to Sark. Congrats to Texas. Going to be really interesting to watch how the committee treats them, and even more interesting to see where A&M gets seeded and then how they handle this internally.